Hello, I'm Paul Roche, and this is my presentation on an introductory lesson for unseen poetry for Leaving Cert English. Importance to curriculum. This section is worth 5% of the overall grade. It is assessed at both higher level and ordinary level, with the depth of questions and required answers changing. It is on average the worst answered section on the paper and is seen as hard to prepare for. It is also often the last covered topic and left to last on the paper, leaving it to being rushed and/or unfinished. This is the main reason I chose this as my topic. This presentation will show how to properly prepare and practice for it. Relevant previous knowledge. Students will have already studied a variety of genres and styles of poems from junior cycle. The unseen text question can be on an unseen poem, such as in the 2019 higher level junior cert English paper. So students should have a level of practice at this style of question. Skills from prescribed poetry study at Leaving Cert, such as referencing and analysing the effects of themes, forms, titles, etc., will carry over. Unseen poetry can be seen as a smaller test to see students' overall knowledge of the mechanics of poetry and the ability to interpret them. As such, it is an easier topic to cover if sufficient work on studied poetry has been completed first. As shown in the diagram, it is the final poetry style question to cover for secondary level English. Beginning of the lesson. To gain initial attention and readiness, otherwise known as SET, it is important to give an overview of the framework of the lesson. We'll achieve this through a slide similar to the first in this presentation, which shows the context of what we are working towards. Social readiness can be obtained through a mixture of smiles and inviting hand gestures. These can help comfortably ease the students into the lesson. To gain motivational awareness, you can introduce the topic in an interesting or unique way. For example, just giving the title of the poem will show students how much they could already answer using their previous knowledge of poetry. Doing this also taps into what they already know from previous poetry and is a great starting off point, as using previous knowledge as a base is another way to gain attention when starting a topic. Unseen poetry questions are predictable in what they ask. There's only a handful of elements that will be asked about on the questions, regardless of the poem in question. In that way, the focus of this initial class would be on getting students familiar and comfortable locating and answering these types of questions. We will use Vygotsky's scaffolding teaching methods, and in particular, Pauline Gibbons' methods from her book Scaffolding Language, Scaffolding Learning, here to guide students through learning about the questions and to working their way towards making their own attempts at the answers. Scaffolding Learning, Part 1. The initial step is to help build background knowledge. As previously stated, students will have knowledge how to react to poetry, so the focus will be on exactly what they will be asked about in the unseen poetry questions. I will show them a graphic, such as seen here, to help bring in visual learners, as well as give an easy reference guide for all students. Then I will model some answers, showing the class what could be said about a title or a theme in a given example. This will help give a better idea of what they should be looking for and to what level when answering questions. This first section of the class has brought in elements to help print, oral, and visual learners. The next part of the class will cater more towards interactive and kinesthetic learners. We will then go into joint construction, using example questions to get the class actively involved in the learning process. This will be a teacher-led discussion with purposeful and leading questions that will keep the class on task while creating an open and inviting dialogue. Hints, such as repeating a word several times to humorous effect, will draw students' attention to it, as well as draw students into the lesson and the key points without simply lecturing to them. This dialogic teaching method will be further explained in the next slide. This discussion will also bring in the now all-important to the curriculum area of oracy. As stated in the syllabus, thinking and talking is just as important as the reading and writing elements of learning. Important in this area is to get everyone in the class involved, so perhaps calling on those who are quiet and/or shy, or those who may simply be losing attention. These steps will also help learners who are more kinesthetic or interactive based have more meaningful involvement with the material and get them involved in the class. Dialogic teaching. This style of teaching is used to get away from the old teaching style of lecturing to the students and instead get them actively involved. Robin Alexander says that this is used to advance their learning and understanding. Here, the focus is to get away from direct instruction, easy to impart, towards discussion and dialogue. This getting students to think for themselves is key to unseen poetry, as in these questions they must look for answers in a new body of text each time. Not all talk is learning talk, and so the teacher must guide discussion in the right direction. As stated earlier, this is through lead-in questions. Questions such as, how is this similar to Platt's teams? Meaningful questions that will be thought about to enhance quality learning. Along with this, the teacher must leave thinking time before calling for answers to get more thoroughly thought responses. The longer the gap left between asking the question and calling for an answer, usually the better the response. The final step in Pauline Gibbons' methodology is to go into independent writing. Instead, at this stage, I would break the class into groups. This collaborative group work with peers can be used as a way to take away teacher instruction, but still give the class support in each other and help them engage with the work directly. This group work will be monitored from the teacher walking around the room to make sure students are staying focused and engaging with the task. I can answer any questions that the students are likely to have. They are more likely to ask questions as you're walking around the room than simply putting up their hand and asking in front of everyone. We'll ask questions in these smaller groups to those members who are not engaging or who are once again losing interest. What the groups come up with can be shared afterwards and presented to the rest of the class to show the different possible answers that each one found. Hopefully, the earlier use of dialogic teaching will promote proper learning talk in these smaller groups. Tying together information known from prescribed poetry into the unseen poetry question under pressure can be extremely difficult for students, especially in an exam-style situation. This is why repeated practice is the best solution. Seeing the same themes, features of styles, etc. that are asked over and over again shows students how this can be a question that can be prepared for just like any other. Getting students over the initial fear of how they will answer these questions has been the focus of the class through the instruction, discussion, group work, and finally leading into them answering their own questions. To end the lesson, I would give homework. This would be answering a Leaving Cert style question on their own. It's not important that they get this right first time, but it is to give me an idea of where they are. With this, I can provide meaningful feedback from student to student. As for difficulties in teaching, I foresee getting the whole class to engage in the class discussion, as well as in their groups, will be a challenge. As for keeping their interest, I can help with this by using techniques such as varying my tone, showing them graphical images, or even a video or soundbite to vary the media they see. Monitoring the group work will also be a new challenge. Here, by moving around the class and fielding questions, I hope to keep them working and engaged. While doing this, I also need to make sure that they don't simply ask for the answers. To help feel as part of the group while doing this, I can come and sit with each group while helping them. This will make it seem less like direct instruction and more like I'm simply part of the group and everyone needs to participate. Key skills. Here, we will go over the 5 key skills of the Leaving Cert curriculum and show how each of them have been met through various tasks in this lesson. Information processing. Proper note-taking of possible topics and questions, as well as the integration of information from different sources, such as the class and the teacher. Critical and creative thinking. Grouping ideas based on attributes, as well as persuasive arguments to show their opinions on the poems. Communication. Analyzing texts from various viewpoints, listening and responding to what others have to say. Working with others. Listening to others' viewpoints, helping others feel included in the group, and communicating ideas to the whole group. Being personally effective. Recognize how to make their voice heard appropriately, resiliency, and make sense of the feedback. The unseen poetry section itself provides some soft cross-curricular links. Relevant historical, geographical, or musical knowledge, etc., could enhance one's ability to engage with any given poem. The methodology for answering questions is where there is greater crossover. In some ways, answering unseen poetry questions is more similar to problem-solving question than a long-form English question. In this way, it can be looked at more as a maths problem or a business question, wherein that the information given must be used and analyzed to extrapolate an answer. In conclusion, unseen poetry is a topic like any other that can be prepared for and practiced. This class plan, using various teaching methods, in particular the scaffolding learning method, has shown that. Key to the lessons plan was to ease students into writing their own answers after meaningful discussion and guidance, along with peer-collaborated work. This was achieved through the previously mentioned scaffolded learning, as well as techniques that catered for different learning styles, such as the use of modeling, as well as the various forms of media used. Feedback and repeated practice is vital for this topic, so having students attempt answers often is the best preparation going forward. They will over time notice patterns in the questions, as well as their ability to scan the poems to find the information they need.